Ka-kang. Well, look at this extreme view. Let me try to change that. Hello.
I didn't see you guys.
Whoa,
digging out some fossils there, Steve.
Steve Conley's holding up something from the archives.
That's all I read. This is it. Everyone turn to your hymnals, page 14, the Book of Blevins.
I love the book of Blevins. I love that. Guys, welcome back to Pencil Live. LIVE is if this is your first time watching this, boy, are you in for a treat. This may be cartooning manna from the heavens right in front of you every Wednesday at 8 p.m. EST if we can help it. If you are new to this, what's happening here? You get to hang out with expert cartoonists. That's right. Pitch me, I must be dreaming. Expert cartoonists from the field. And we talk shop. We have guests on. We talk about the business, what's new, what's old, what should be new again, and vice versa. I'd like to introduce myself. I am your first host. My name is Jamar Nicholas. I am a cartoonist in good standing. I must be. Look at the Hawaiian shirt. They don't give these to just anybody. You got to earn these. I am I'm an author-illustrator of Leon Extraordinary, which is a series at Scholastic underneath the graphics imprint. My next book in the series, Leon, Worst Friends Forever. Guys, I just got my comps. They're right here.
Wow. Are we going to have an unboxing video tonight?
All right, real quick. I don't want to take away from Steve. You ready? Boom. Look at that.
What is that?
That's the paperback.
How many pages?
240. And here's the hardcover.
Oh, how many pages is the
hardcover? I think they're 240 as well.
They didn't add any extra things to the hardcover?
The jacket is extra.
The jackets?
Yeah, the jacket is extra. But very excited. The official launch for this is October 1st. In mere weeks, you guys, you'll have your hands on them too. Thank you so much. I would be remiss if I did not introduce my co-host. He is known as the, what am I going to call it? The Johnny Appleseed of webcomics. I got to get you one of those Daniel Boone hats. No, Johnny Appleseed had the pot on his head. We're going to do that. No, you don't like that
Irving Forbush.
He is known in these wrestling streets as Stone Cold Steve Conley. What's up, Steve Conley?
Hello, guys. It's so good to see you. My name is Steve Conley. I write and draw the webcomic The Middle Age. You can read it at Webtoons, Tapas, Go Comics, my own website. I also make the TTRPG stuff if you play the Dungeons and the Dragons. Jamar, I think you said pioneer one time, and then every time you said that, it was like, I thought of you. You have died of dysentery.
Like Oregon Trail of comics. I love it.
I appreciate that. I would be remiss if I didn't introduce the Tower of Power, the man of the hour, too sweet to be sour, the marvel of mark making, Mr. Mike Manley.
Good evening, everyone.
I like that, the rainbow effect. Oh, Mike.
My name is Mike Manley. I'm a 40-year veteran of comics and animation. I've drawn your childhood.
Oh, that voice is wild. Mike, what's on your drafting table these days?
Well, literally right before our podcast, I sent out this week's Phantom. And then right after this podcast, I will be starting on A Week of Judge Parker. And then right before next week's podcast, I will start on another week of the Phantom.
It's
like a treadmill, man. It's like, when you do a comic strip, it's just like no days off.
No, it never ends. No sleep till Manly. That's real.
No sleep until cancellation.
Well, guys, you know what? I wanna get this started sooner rather than later. Usually we have a lot of witty banter before our guests come on. We had a really interesting conversation last week on the podcast, Sans Guests, where we talked about your what was it? Your comic book journey, or what? I forgot what we talked about already. What did we do last week? We talked about your toolkit, right?
Yeah, we talked about the toolkit. We talked about what you need, and from the angle of
what you always need to be doing.
right.
Always be dialing.
That's right. Always be drawing. Yeah. Where we kind of just talked about, like, in the modern times, one of the jokes I always talk about are having a facsimile machine as the highest piece of tech in your studio. But like in 2024, what should you be having? But all of it. Give me everything. But what I think is even equally important nowadays is where you're getting your information. And that's why I'm always kind of like doubling back on us being these expert cartoonists. There's not a lot of people in the space that you can trust to give you that good information. But our guests tonight, who are the showrunners of Comic Lab, the Comic Lab podcast, that's right. Hold on, I got a graphic. I love the graphic.
So this is a crossing of streams.
When worlds collide. Guys, we have, oh man, I'm all over the place today. We have Brad Guigar and Dave Kellett are with us today. Let me clear the screen. This is monumental. Anytime we have like more than one guest at a time, I'm always just hoping things don't go haywire. But I'm super excited to have all these faces on the screen. And I just said to the guys in the room before we went live, I hope nobody feels slighted that I have both of these guys on at the same time, because both of them in their own right should have their own episode. So, this dynamic duo.
Too late now.
Yeah. Whoever wins tonight comes back.
That's right. So we're going to do a death match. We're going to have comic book Squid Game. I love it.
Make them fight, Jamar, for screen time.
So before I bring them in, I just want to give you guys some rules of engagement. We're going to have a very nice shop talk and have you guys interact with us. So if you have a question for us, please put it in the chat. I cannot guarantee we'll get everything on for the session, but do your best, and I'll do my best to help you guys out. Sound good? Great.
That sounded very Philly.
Not me.
You said on.
I did say on.
On. Yeah.
So speaking of Philadelphia, we got another Philly guy in the green room. So all right, I'm confusing myself. Let's get this started. Guys, prepare for rendering. The Comic Lab is here. Brad Guigar and Dave Kellett. Ping! Look at that. I rendered you.
Wow, I haven't been rendered in years.
I normally have to go to a doctor for that. That's great.
Didn't cost you. That's covered with your insurance, so I'm glad we're able to help you out.
That's right.
Guys, welcome to the live stream. I'm so excited to have you guys on.
Let's talk comics.
I love it. You brought your crew with you. I love it.
Yeah.
So one of the first things I have to say is how exciting it is to talk to you guys, and also how exciting it is to know that you have such a huge fan base. There's just people all over the industry who are always like, "Yo, did you hear Comic Lab this week?" And I'm like, no, it's really cool that your reputation precedes you. But I don't want to lose the men behind the podcast in this episode. I want to talk about you guys individually and as a group, and also maybe we could start here. How did you guys come up with Comic Lab?
Oh boy! Well, this was Brad and I have been friends since about 1999, 2000 when we first met at San Diego Comic-Con. Loved each other as peers and as friends. Started talking about how we would get the same emails as web cartoonists in the early 2000s, asking the same questions. We would talk to friends, Chris Straub, Scott Kurtz. They would say the same thing. We're getting these same questions. And we said, you know what, why don't we pay it forward? Let's just start sharing on a podcast at the time called Webcomics Weekly. We did that for, Brad, what was it, 80 shows or so? And
a good 80 shows.
A good, wonderful run. But as you guys know, with the three of you, it is nigh impossible to get four cartoonists on a set schedule together where one is not doing a project or one is not submitting files or late on a deadline. And so as at Webcomics Weekly, after wonderful years together, stopped producing. And then a couple of years after that, Brad and I were like, that was so much fun. I want to keep doing that. And so I don't remember which one of us came up with the name Comic Lab, but it was always been a match made in heaven in terms of sharing our love of comics with each other and then with the podcast.
Well, and not only that, but when we were coming up, if you see Dave's amazing documentary Stripped that talks about the early days of webcomics, when we were coming up, all of us, a bunch of us, I'm sure, can identify with this. We were seen by the syndicated cartoonists as interlopers, as usurpers, and a lot of other words that are nowhere near as nice as that. They did not like the fact that we were coming in and putting comics on the web and publishing ourselves. Yep. And there was a lot of animosity there. There was a lot of print versus web wars that if you've got enough gray in your beard, you can remember. And as a result of that, we really didn't have a connection with the older generation to do knowledge share and hand down information. So a lot of what Dave and I have been doing, particularly in Comic Lab since we started in 2018, is we wanted to make sure that we wanted to be that connection between our generation and the next generation, passing some information around, because that was something that we never had and that we really missed. And we wanted to make sure that didn't happen again.
And for us too, it was also a recognition, as I'm sure all three of you have found in your careers, that when you move away from print constrictions, which are more limited in terms of what positions can be offered, what jobs can be offered, online, it costs me nothing to share everything I've ever learned about webcomics with my peers, because for Brad to succeed, I don't have to fail. And for me to succeed, Brad doesn't have to fail. It can be a rising tide. There is a huge English-speaking audience out there to share on the web. And so it is literally a no-cost scenario to help our fellow cartoonists around the world with whatever information we have. And we always talk about it amongst ourselves. Like, if we can even save them 6 months of trouble down a bad path, it's a great thing that we wish we could have had, when we were in our 20s.
Yeah, that's something I say all the time. That for me to succeed, Dave does not have to fail. I mean, it's always nice.
It's a bonus.
It doesn't hurt.
It helps. It helps. just around the edges.
It's the cherry on top.
That's what it is. It's the cherry on top.
Yeah,
it's the sweet little amuse-bouche on top of your career success.
It just makes it that much nicer.
Yeah, that's right.
You look over and you see him going down like a B-17.
It literally is just the strafing fire following my career down. Yeah, exactly. And just the Schadenfreude on Brad's part, just like, oh, this is great. I'm really enjoying this moment. Yeah. But anyway, so that's how the show got started. And then what's nice, and you three know this obviously, is that it's just fun to talk about cartooning and the art of making comics. And there's not a week that goes by on that podcast that I don't learn something from Brad, who I've known for 25 years and followed super closely. I'm still learning from him. And so the conversation is not just fun, it's actually instructive to me, who's trying to pay forward what I know. So I can't say enough fun things about just talking about the art of comics. We love it.
Yeah.
Wow, that's fantastic. And it's great. And one thing I was going to ask you guys, because I've been podcasting for a while, kind of like longer than I care to admit, because I had a project or two before this, did you ever find a period where people weren't really connecting with podcasts, or did you spend more time going, oh, this is what a podcast is and this is the link to it? Or did you always kind of seem to have a steady stream of listeners?
Well, we were always pretty lucky in that regard, and that might have been because we had a niche audience that we could tap into. Mm-hmm. We always say if Patreon and Kickstarter had been around back when we started Webcomics Weekly, it would have been.
We would still be doing Webcomics Weekly. Yeah.
We would still be doing that. It might be a very different sounding show, but oh my God, if the ability to monetize a podcast, because when did we start that, Dave? 2007.
Very early in the podcasting
it was
sphere, not 20 years after podcasting in general got started. So
because it was about the time that the How to Make Webcomics book came out. We were doing it to promote that, and oh my gosh, it would have been things are so, as we can see, you know,
Yeah.
we're with live streaming and the ability to record with video. Dave and I do video all the time. In fact, I'll just apologize right off the bat. He and I have a system. We'll point to each other, and we've got signs that we do. If you see me start waving, it's just because I'm so used to being able to do this on video that I can't stop myself anymore.
It's not because his horse tranquilizers are wearing off.
You might have to.
So yeah, no, but also to finish that thought, it's funny looking back how we were much, and to turn the credit to someone else. Do you remember how Akewood very early on in the game basically created his own Patreon system?
Yeah,
but it was too early. Like the technology wasn't there. Not enough of us had credit cards online yet in terms of feeling safe about that. And so he had a brilliant idea, but it was just too early. And I think Webcomics Weekly suffered from the same thing, is that we were too early, both from a monetary standpoint in terms of how to remunerate remunerate. What am I, a professor? Well, how to make money from a podcast, but also we were too early in the sense that Pro-Am microphones were terrible in 2007. You know, it was more akin to a gaming headphone than it was a Pro-Am microphone. So, anyway, so that's that. It was a great experience, though, and a great way to cut our teeth, and it was a wonderful early window into how this kind of thing that you three have built here, where you're streaming, you're recording, you're also interacting with comments. We tried early nascent versions of all those, and to terrible effect with the technology at the time.
We did live streaming way back in the day as a Patreon level, and we found out people actually would pay more not to see us.
Yes,
we don't mind listening to you, but your faces. That was actually a high.
That was the highest tier.
Level. Like we'll pay you a little extra money. Just keep your face off the camera, Guigar. They would often say, "Can you use the Apple emojis over your faces?" That you know, the sort of like talking. Wow. And they had some suggestions on which ones to use, as a matter of fact, and I didn't appreciate that at all.
So anyway, the long story short, though, podcasting has been a joy for us as cartoonists because we love talking about comics, as I said, but also it's just, I love hanging out with Brad every week. It's a genuine joy in my life, from mostly being in this quiet little studio by myself. To have this hour or two where I'm sitting laughing with Brad every week. So I absolutely love it.
I love how, by and large, it's evergreen content too. It's like material that's always going to have value. You go back into the big, to the archives and just, hours and hours, countless hours. And it's wonderful stuff. I wish you kind of wish they were doing it for, 80 years, or you wish you could. There was a Milk Kniff was being recorded and interviewed, right?
Yeah. Well, the thing is, if we do it as long as we hope to do it, we will have our generations of Milt Kniff in 2050. It's been lovely to sort of be able to also meet all our peers and heroes over the years. Both between Webcomics Weekly and now Comic Lab, and then having done Stripped, it's been fun to sort of meet and greet everybody in the industry.
And starting that far back, there's probably been 3 generations of cartoonists come in to the business easy since then.
I'd say that's a pretty accurate count. Yeah.
And going back that far. Because you had the people that was back in the not too long after the duty.com and all the
Homestar Runner and all that sort of stuff back in the day.
Yeah. And I was teaching DCAD during that time, and you had kids that were following and doing stuff, but it was like almost like early radio or something. So it's like you had to sort of be in the know. I mean, that's back when you were still getting AOL discs in the
exactly.
Right.
But for us, everything was experimentation, because webcomics at that time were very much like figuring it out on the go and very much keeping our heads on a swivel to watch what our peers were doing around us to see what was working. Like, how did I build this version of my website? Okay, for 2.0, I'm going to do I'm going to steal a little bit from Jamar. I'm going to steal a little bit from Brad. I'm going to steal a little bit from, and so you take a little bit from everybody and then constantly incorporate into your career. And the same was true with podcasting, but our cartooning was much the same thing. It was what formats are working, what size resolutions are people. I mean, literally as brass tacky as that. Like, what was the smallest file size I could display to maintain my readership, but not murder my server costs, which were a big consideration before Amazon clouds and stuff.
That's back when I even knew HTML, and so you would go to a website and you would like something that was on that, and you'd hack that little bit of code.
Yep. Oh, yeah, absolutely.
You know,
yes.
And then you could, and like now you
replicate it on the, it's all hidden behind CSS and HTML5 now, and you can't find it. Yeah. I mean, I built my first website when I was doing cartooning grad school in England. I built my first website using Microsoft Word. Wow. I kid you not. If you want a worse program to build a website with, I can recommend nothing to you, because that is the worst website or the worst program to build. What did you build your first website with, Brad?
My first website was GeoCities. Do you remember this? GeoCities?
Oh,
I had a GeoCities site you can still find on the Wayback Machine. And it was, for me, I mean, it was kind of plug and play, and it was everything I ever wanted. It was, and my whole plan was in the year 2000, my whole plan was to put my comic up on the web and to build such an audience that all of those newspaper syndicates that sent me rejection letters would be forced to come crawling to me on their hands and knees and beg me to sign a syndication contract. Needless to say, it didn't happen, but I had a lot of fun in the meantime. And it was that very, very first experience of counting page views, right? That we all very
so
early.
Important, yeah.
Hits. How many hits do you have?
Yes, yes, the hits, the views, and you had the little, make-believe counter on the bottom that ran on God knows what. I remember the first time for me, this is true story. Getting 100 hits in a day was like a big milestone, and I was getting closer and closer. And one night, I woke up the next morning and I saw that I'd gotten 99 visitors to my website, and I came down to Carol and my wife, and I said, "Oh my God, I can't believe it. I'm so close. I'm going to crack 100 pretty soon. I got 99 last night." And her face dropped. And I said, what's the matter? She said, "I forgot to visit last night." But as much as and by the way, if you tune into Comic Lab, you'll hear me, wagging my finger about don't count your followers. Don't worry about the numbers. We all started from the same place.
Oh, sure.
We all obsessed over that stuff. It's not healthy to do it, but we all started. You gotta kind of train yourself not to do it.
Well, one of the big things about that now is the last 2 or 3 years, how you had this whole generation of young artists, cartoonists using Instagram.
Yeah.
They were building their brand, they were building their audience, and then Instagram or Facebook, Meta, screwed everything up.
Yeah.
Right? And then they go like, well, no, nobody's seeing my stuff. I'm investing all this time. I'm putting out my comic. I'm trying to, get people to see my stuff. And now it seems like I'm getting no traction, and like no website is working for me now.
Right.
That was like really, because I had a couple students who then became assistants, and they were right in the middle of that. And then like Webtoons came in, and there was this real paradigm shift, I think, with a lot of the younger, like late teen, early 20 cartoonists in like these are things that you couldn't control. You only could try to surf. Well, what do I do? Do I go over here? Do I not? Yeah. Do I not do this? They tell you now, don't worry about numbers. But if I don't worry about my numbers, then how do I know it's worth me doing it?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And we're at a real turning point too, where I think most adults and even teens recognize that the promise that social media, the implicit promise that social media made us, is not being fulfilled, and in fact, is not working for us. And so, there's a fairly large scale reevaluation on not just on artists, but on musicians, on publishing houses, on all sorts of different creatives, on like how is my career being served by sharing my art for free on your platform in a way that only builds and develops your platform. I can't link out in any effective way. I can't drive my readers or my listeners, if I'm a musician, to my Kickstarter page or my Patreon page or my book sales or my album sales. And so, yeah, you're seeing a really wholesale reevaluation and frankly moving away from Facebook and Instagram and Threads and Twitter, thank God, towards Mastodon perhaps, and Blue Sky, which really has taken off since Brazil had Twitter banned. And so, but I will say that it's a liminal stage, because I don't think we yet have the next thing in place to take it over.
Well, and not only that, but something that Dave and I have found, and we've been talking about this for a long time. Everything that you see online is that it's all social media, everything social media, that websites are dead, right? And that all of the things that we came up with, websites and email newsletters primarily, are dead, and that you got to be on social media. And I think people keep saying that because they always have been saying that. And the fact of the matter is, and Dave, between the two of us, Dave and I have done 3 Kickstarters this year, and every one of them, we go back and we both do really granular analytics to see
religious
where those clicks
tracking
are
of
coming
those
from.
analytics. Yeah.
And we have found out uniformly that Twitter hasn't been delivering clicks. Instagram never did, but certainly hasn't resurrected itself. You know where we're getting our traffic? It's from the previous Kickstarters that we've done. It's from the websites, and it's from our email outreach. It's from newsletters. In Dave's case, that's MailChimp. In my case, ever since the January, it's been Substack. Everything old is new again. And that's why we've been really railing on people for the last 9 months or so, particularly. You need a website. It's something no one else is saying. It's something nobody talks about, but you need a website. That's what's working right now. And it sure ain't Instagram. It isn't Twitter. At Blue Sky, I have seen some good things over the past 2 weeks. Wouldn't you say, Dave, that for the last 2 weeks, Blue Sky has been really cresting?
Yeah. So listen, I'm not an evangelist for Blue Sky or anything, but I will say that I had 1/10 of the follower count on Blue Sky in my most recent Kickstarter, which ended about a month ago. 1/10 of the followers of Twitter, for example, just as a comparison. And I had, I think, 6 times as many people come from Blue Sky as Twitter. Yeah. Twitter, which I've been on for the better part of a decade, constantly updating. So like the quid pro quo has been there. You know what I mean? That's not in question. The question is the limitations that Twitter has been putting in place in terms of linking out, getting people off platform.
Sure.
And so I actually made this Kickstarter was really instructive to me. I'd made the decision. I'm done with Threads. I'm done with Instagram. I'm done with Twitter, which is great too, because it also cuts down on the racism and the misogyny a little bit. It's been nice. It's been nice to trim that out a little bit, just a little bit. And Blue Sky has been very welcoming. It feels, for those that haven't tried it, it feels to me like early Twitter, which has been lovely.
I have it, but I don't really get much traction. Ironically, the most traction I get is from Facebook.
I'll be darned.
The most traction I get a lot of people liking my stuff or seeing my stuff, get eyeballs. But as far as, I think, discussion, this back and forth, it's Facebook is still better.
And that's we always say on the show that your mileage may vary. I mean, by all means, make a pragmatic choice for what's working for your career.
Absolutely,
because there's always going to be horrible billionaires that are owning something or other. You know what I mean? We could all find fault with any of the 6 or 7 major platforms, and whatever billionaire owns that one.
Yeah.
So Brad and I always advocate you might as well take a pragmatic approach to which one is working for you.
Yeah.
If you, a nice cartoonist, are interacting with your nice audience and you're finding each other and the links are working and you're finding it working out, you can ignore the nonsenses of the Zuckerbergs of the world, and just keep doing what you're doing well. But for me, the kicker was having been on Twitter and built a lovely audience for a decade. This most recent Kickstarter, and I'm forgetting, Brad, I told you the number. Do you remember how many actual people came from Twitter It was something incredibly small, like 4, I think.
Yeah, in fact, 4 I think was high. It was like 1 or 2.
I think it might have been 1 or 2 out of
It was
11,000
very,
people or 9,000
very-
people, whatever it was,
Yeah.
on Twitter.
You've got thousands on Twitter. You got maybe 1 or 2. You got 40,000 on Instagram. And what was the Instagram?
That was absolutely, it was like 1 person, or no, it was 0. You're right, it was 0. So anyway, so I just made that, like, what am I doing here? Was my reaction as a cartoonist is, if they're not seeing every cartoon that they signed up to see, like if I want to see Jamar's work, but the algorithm is showing me 1 out of every 10 of Jamar's images, that's not working for me as a reader. And then if Jamar is like, hey, I've been sharing all this work with you. Hey, you know what? Worst Friends Forever is coming out in 2 weeks. I'd love you to pre-order, but I'm not seeing that link. That's not working for him. So what are we doing on there anymore? You know what I mean? And so the decision was made very easy for me by this Kickstarter, because I was like, in hard brass tacks analytics, I could see exactly tracking who was coming from where, and they weren't coming from social media for the most part. So that made it easy for me. Anyway, that's my diatribe on social media at the moment.
Is that affected by age? Can you track your age?
I will say the older the readership, the more likely they are to be on Facebook or GeoCities. I tell you what, they love them some friends here. They love them some friends. No, I'm not a spring chicken anymore, but like I will say it's a drastically older audience on Facebook than on any other social media platform. Just because all of our grandmothers got on Facebook somewhere in the early 2000s. They learned it, and now they're like, I want to see pictures of my grandbabies. I'm going on to Facebook for that, and that's what they do. You know,
absolutely. Well, and that's the other thing. Like, I do a lot of stuff on Patreon. It's a big part of my daily life. And when a new person signs up for Patreon, the first thing I do is they get a 1-question Patreon, or they get a 1-question questionnaire that says, how did you find out about my Patreon? Do you know, as of now, I've been charting this for a long time, 75% say my website. And I know from my own analytics that most of my website users are desktop users, which is also very counterintuitive, which tells me that I've got kind of a gray audience. My audience is a little bit older, right?
Same,
which is by the way, which is fantastic. I heard I was talking to one guy at a freaking comic convention not too long ago, and he says, "Oh, you know how you get off with your friends and you all have that same comic convention conversation where you say, I didn't get a good place on the floor today. How's it going for you? Oh, it's a slow crowd. Sundays are always, it's the same 10 sentences everybody always says to each other." And he was saying, you know what my problem is? I said, what's your problem? He says, my problem is I've got an old audience. My audience is gray. And I said, you're crazy. An older audience is a beautiful thing. They've got money to spend. They've got time. They by the way, they know how a bookmark freaking works on their browser. Some of them are still using RSS. I love my older graying audience. They've supported me for 10 years now, and as long as they don't die, I'm looking forward for another 10 years.
Yeah, absolutely. And when honestly, the generation that's right now teen and early 20-something came of age in basically walled gardens of apps for Twitter, apps for TikTok, apps for Instagram that really precluded, for the most part, linking out. And so I think when TikTok gets banned or sold in a couple of months here, it's going to be interesting to see what happens to that audience, where they go. I don't think they will go to the wider web because they didn't grow up on the wider web. But I'm going to be interested to see where they land when TikTok has whatever transformation it's about to have in the next 6 months. You know,
it's about to evolve like a Pokemon or something.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, by the way, my niece told me a funny joke the other day. She's like,
Brandon, that's beautiful.
Brandon,
that's
well
beautiful.
done. Brandon, well done.
I'm just jealous I didn't think of it first, Brandon.
Can I ask you guys, because I'm not a YouTube native, I never jumped in big on YouTube. When someone is making these comments, are these icons being grabbed from their YouTube account? Is that what that's from?
Yeah, so right now we're streaming from StreamYard to a couple of Facebook pages and
Mhm.
also to YouTube. So wherever they're checking in from is grabbing their icon from there.
That's fantastic.
That's
pretty
really cool.
It's
That's really,
cool, right?
I wasn't sure if you had those as saved accounts or whether those were pulling in from YouTube. Anyway, that was my grandfather question of the day. Thank you very much for.
Speaking of having an older audience,
Yeah, that's
Now that
right.
my lumbago's acting up, I'll see myself out. I'll.
You have your beaded seat behind you.
We're gonna
Oh my
mix.
God.
We're
The
gonna mix
bead-
up your
Beaded seat
medicine
is
for
so
your.
specific. Oh, chef's kiss on the
Yeah.
beaded seat.
Yeah, we're gonna mix up your recipe for your lumbago in an old boot.
So, guys, I do have a couple of questions. So, they're starting to stack up in our chat here, and a good friend of the stream, and also a cartoonist and curator in his own right, Monty Latif from Facebook says, "I've asked y'all this before. That's regarding to the Pizza guys. But I want to hear from Brad and Dave. Do you all feel current tech favors web cartoonists compared to other comic creators?" What a great question.
Ooh,
I don't
Brad, you
think
want to
so.
tackle that one?
I don't think so at all, and I'll tell you why. It's easy to take a look and say that current tech favors web cartoonists because obviously, number one, we assume that web cartoonists are using digital art and so forth, but we know that corporate published cartoonists are doing the same thing. We know that web cartoonists tend to use social media and the other electronic communications a little bit more adeptly, but it's also something that if you are a corporate published cartoonist, a lot of times the first thing they ask you when they're thinking about signing you is, what's your social media numbers? That's the first question that they want to know. Why? Because they're going to push along promotion to you and they're not going to pay you for it.
Yeah,
That's a
because
whole
they
nother
fired their marketing
conversation.
departments 5 years ago. Yeah.
But having said that, all the other things that are out there help everybody as well. In other words, crowdfunding. We see a lot of corporate publishers using crowdfunding. We see a lot of people who are able to do corporate publishing because they can supplement with crowdfunding like Patreon. I don't think that it gives an advantage one way or another to either side. I think both sides are using it for what they're doing, and it's like a tool. It's like a tool. It doesn't matter whose hand it's in. One person's going to take that hammer and do one thing with it. Another person's going to take that hammer and they might do something completely different. But as long as they're getting their objective, that's the important thing. So I don't think it's giving. Dave, what do you think? Do you think that there's an advantage one way or the other for current technology?
I don't. What I will say is that I feel like current technology has brought independent and web-based cartoonists up to the level of what previous professional publishing companies would be able to do in terms of reach, outreach, marketing, sales, follow-up, customer service. Software's just made it easier in the same way that there's no longer a secretarial class because I have Microsoft Office on my computer, right. I feel like there's one of the reasons why the marketing teams have all been fired from various publishers is because there's not enough money coming in, but also we can do it, you know what I mean? And so I find as an independent web-based cartoonist, I can be very nimble. In fact, more nimble, I think, than the marketing teams that have to check with each other and follow up. And then it's the following day that they can tweet the thing. So I have a certain nimbleness that makes it advantageous, but I don't know that it favors me. I think it just brings me up to whatever level of communication they previously could pay for, you know?
Right.
Yeah, it levels the playing field. It's like if you're a college kid now, you're using Photoshop and all these high-end programs, you're using actually the same programs that people that are in the profession that you're going to enter into are using. And so that kind of gives everybody the same exoskeleton, right? So to speak. But I do think that it's always the people that are sort of the hunter-gatherers and think a little bit outside of the box that kind of figure out a way, like what you guys are talking about, a way that works for you, because that's the weird thing about cartooning, right? It's not all equal. The business is not all equal. You got people that make gag cartoons, and people that make, all these different, you got people that are doing continuity
Yep.
or non-continuity, right?
Right.
Yep.
Right.
And then you've got people that are like more writer cartoonists, right? And then you have people that are more artistic writers, right? The art drives it, or the idea drives it.
Right.
And I think you really saw that with Webtoons, is you saw that they had a real mix, probably more, I think, to me, more than anybody else, at least in the beginning, of having stuff like that was trying to appeal to a broad audience. Because that's the one thing I think people kind of forget in all this thing, is that cartooning, comic strips, whether they're web comics or it's a mass medium. And so you're trying to reach the broadest possible audience. That's the way it used to be. And now we're kind of narrow casting in a way that allows you to say, well, I just want to do comics about gender, or I want to do comics about, wizards or whatever. And you can kind of tailor it and maybe find an audience that was way harder when it was just print.
Oh yeah, absolutely. There's no question that like the way comics are published now for indies, for web comics, for small companies, everybody from Boom to IDW or something, versus what you would have had to do in the 50s, 60s, 70s. I mean, the reason why we got the cartoon memes of the guy on the desert island with the one coconut tree is because it appealed to the 80-year-old grandmother and the 8-year-old, and we don't have to do that anymore. And I find that so much more advantageous, because thank God, it brings in a billion more voices into cartooning.
Right.
Stories that we did not get 30 years ago, cartoonists that we did not get 30, 40 years ago. And it's a much bigger playing field where you're not trying to support 40 payrolls. You're just trying to support yourself. And that is enough. You can make a $50,000 to $100,000 career online with your, as you said, your narrow casted audience or your niche audience. And all the better. You know what I mean? If that's the same damn career as it would have been 30 years ago, but now you can do the story you want to tell. And so to go back to our friend who had asked the question, the nice thing here too is that not only am I more nimble as a web cartoonist, and so I think I'm leaning into this now, not only am I more nimble in terms of being able to say what I want to say, when I want to say it, when it's appropriate to the audience, say if something's trending on a social media platform, but I also get my numbers immediately and my analytics immediately. So I got those Kickstarter numbers immediately based on what was working, what was not working, and I could course correct, right? Right. But if I have a book that's going through, God forbid, Diamond, I'll get that information 600 to 600 years from now when Margaret enters it from her fax machine into her teletype.
And you're going to get it on a dot matrix printout.
Yeah,
with
she's
the little
the way, and you know what? It's not so bad anymore with them. But like they had the one woman that entered data, manually in Baltimore, and it's like, what's happening? Why are we operating like it's 1965? What are we doing? And so it's not at all the nimbleness that you want as a cartoonist to be able to say cause effect. I do this, I make more sales. I do this, I reach more audience. You try to, like with a traditional distribution system, you have to wait for so many things to be reported back up the chain and then back to you. So in that respect, to our question asker, I think I will admit that it's probably the nimbleness and the ability to pivot on your feet is more useful and helpful and appropriate for a web-based cartoonist than would have been for a traditional cartoonist, whether it be for the big two or for any of the publishers. I would think
it was typically 3 months before you would know what something sold. So
Yeah,
by
and
the-
that's just, I mean, it's 2024. That's ridiculous. That way, yeah, exactly.
So people would
So,
order heavy on number 1,
yeah,
and then by the time you got your numbers for number 4, right? Everybody slashes number 2. Then you see if it's doing something, they order number 3. Number 4, you kind of have an idea: is it going up or is it going down, right?
yeah,
And what the other thing I learned from self-publishing back in the day, they spent a lot of money buying ads that now I think actually really didn't. That money wasn't as effective as what you guys can do now with your Kickstarters and your social media
oh,
Yeah.
sure.
and all that stuff.
Well, as a matter of fact, Dave, do you want to get into that?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of advertising, just to jump back on that topic,
Yeah.
a lot of advertising was elevator talk for the middle manager to be able to tell their vice president, oh, we're doing something. You're like, we
Right.
bought this many ads. I think there was the ability to quantify how much advertising worked in any field 20, 30 years ago was negligible. You know, I mean, aside from maybe television advertising where you had next morning results for viewership,
Mhm.
it was you were throwing money good after bad with the hopes that you would catch people 1 out of 7 times for an ad that was placed. And so even now with advertising as a cartoonist, my thought, and Brad, feel free to cut me off if you think I'm wrong here, is that my work is the advertising. And
Right.
so if for God's sakes, don't pay for advertising. It's if my freely given cartoons are not funny enough or not engaging enough or not dramatic enough that you're not desiring to come back, then no amount of ad money that I throw at that is going to help
Right.
you.
Right.
So for me, in terms of the tech aspects of being a web cartoonist, one of the things that I do is I also save on advertising. I don't spend a
Yeah.
damn. Brad can attest to this. In my full 25-year career, I've spent exactly $100 on web-based advertisement, and because we tracked it super specifically, it brought in absolutely bupkis in terms of results. So,
0. Yeah.
But Brad, am I wrong there in thinking that way?
No, you're absolutely right. In that this is the whole thing that we did since day one in webcomics was we put out a comic, we made it easy to get. We called it free, but it was actually ad supported. But ad supported isn't a very good marketing term. Free is a wonderful marketing term. So we said we were giving it away for free, right? And we put it up on websites. We made it very easy for people to see it, fall in love with it, make connections with it. It's what we've been trying to do on social media. It's what we are actively doing on places like Patreon and Substack and Kickstarter. All of that audience building, we make it very, very easy to get in and fall in love with our comics. And then after that, it's yours to lose, in my opinion. One of the things that we found out very early, and amazing, we like just a couple of years ago, we had somebody who said, they were doing a webcomic and a very, very good one. And they said to us, I don't think I'm going to do a book. People have already read this stuff. They're not going to buy a book. And Dave and I are like falling over each other. He's saying, no, you don't understand. They will buy it because they read it online. That's the whole point. They want the archive. They want that thing. And also the same reason, by the way, same reason you wear a t-shirt. Every one of you guys wearing a t-shirt, you are telling us who you are with that shirt. In fact, I've got my pen and pencil shirt right over here, Jamar. But that's the whole reason you buy a t-shirt. You're telling the world who you are. That person buying your book, that person buying your merchandise is making a very similar choice to put on their bookshelf. This is who I am. Even if they're just saying it to themselves, this is who I am. All of that goes into a buying experience. At no point do they say to themselves, "Oh, I've already read this." That's not the point. And that's been proven over 25, 26 years of web cartooning. And depending on when you start the counter, it's always been the case is that we can always count on our readers to kind of be there and back us up. Right, Dave?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I find it, and not to overdo the praise for it, but I find it to be an incredibly rewarding way for a cartoonist to make a living. That's sort of direct to my audience, no middleman. My wife works in television, by just as a side note, and so every once in a while, one of her friends or peers will be like, Dave, God, you'd be great in TV. You should write for TV. And there's nothing that I would rather do than suddenly get notes and have to work for a network and have to please 17 bosses and all the check boxes of people pre-screening. And then I have to re-edit a scene. That sounds like misery to me as a creator.
Yeah.
I am so happy that I have found that I've landed at this moment of technology where I can directly talk to 100,000 people, giving them it for free, so that 10,000 people become core audience, so that 1,000 people will buy a book, and so 100 people a year will buy original art, right? And so that to me is such a wonderful way to write exactly what I want to write, draw exactly what I want to draw, and have an audience say, "Oh my God, this is the exact comic I want to read." Sure, it's a small number. I ain't never going to get Garfield numbers, but
you don't have to.
I don't have to, and I'm perfectly happy with that. I've come to peace with that. You know.
Yeah.
I have so many things to say. Well, one of the things that
the first one is to hell with you, Dave.
is thinking about kind of like, we talk a lot about everybody's kind of entry point into the business is usually like some secret hole in the side of the mountain that seals up automatically after you go through it. So like when, I came in doing self-publishing floppies, I was just really happy to find a kindred community of people who are in the same boat as me, trying to figure this stuff out. What I've always found super exciting about you web dudes is what I'll call you tonight, is that you guys seem to be like really about your business in a different way that we were. I feel like, especially, in the time that I was coming up in self-publishing, you're more worried about like print stock and who can I find this, a printer that's not in Canada, and all these like really kind of low things. Right. And you guys I remember meeting you guys a long time ago. You talk about Alexa scores and RSS feeds and all these other kind of things of selling. You're speaking French, and now here we are now where you guys very easily talk about the business part of this. We haven't really talked about what pen you use and that kind of stuff. And I think that's really important for young artists, or even just amateurs or pro-ams or anybody to think about. It's like the business has to come first.
Yes.
In a way.
Well, it's like that old joke of like, what do bankers talk about when they get together? They talk about art. What do artists talk about when they get together? They talk about money. And so but also because understanding this and seeing how it works and knowing what levers to pull when in business makes it possible for me to never have a boss, and to never have to go to a 9-to-5, and to be able to hire my wonderful full-time assistant for the last 6 years, and to be able to put out 16 to 20 books. I don't remember how many I've done now. And like, I have the life I want because I understand business. I'm not great at it. Do I make mistakes? Hell yes, I make mistakes, but they're all like $1,000 mistakes rather than like a company that either kept $40,000 from me that I never heard about, or withheld the check, or some weird financial stuff that went on, or they made a mistake, like some publishers I've worked with in the past. They printed the book wrong. Anyway, what I'm getting at there is that my mistakes are all manageable size mistakes, and I try to learn from them. If they're a $5 mistake here, $1,000 mistake here. But what's great is, as artists, we're all curious people, right? And so I'm actually a better artist because I'm putting on these hats and I'm learning what it is to walk in a world of sales, or as a banker, or as an accountant, or an insurance dealer, because I've had to try to figure all those things out in making films and books and TVs and Comic-Con appearances. And so I can write better stuff when I need a character who is an insurance adjuster or a banker, or, you know what I mean, Brad? Am I wrong there? Like,
no. You're absolutely right. And not only that, what you're glossing over is you say, well, I make a mistake. I make $1,000 make a mistake, but it's my mistake. It's your mistake. I've been in situations where the mistake was somebody else's. That's a lot harder to live with. I don't mind making mistakes. I'll learn from that any day of the week. But that is something we have to be honest about when we're talking about this subject, particularly to younger people, is that if you're going to do this, you've got to learn business. You've got this is part of it. You've got to learn how to do get a printer quote. You've got to learn how to do Kickstarter math. You've got to learn how to do that kind of stuff. And I hear there I was on a comic convention panel one time. There was a guy sitting next to me. He says, "I don't want to learn business. I just want to draw comics." And I swear to God, I almost lunged for him because I said, "There's kids in here. They might think you know what you're talking about. You can't talk like that. You've got to know the business. We've got 100+ years of comics history that shows you what happens if you don't know the business when you sign
you sign over Superman for $130 when you don't understand
right.
business, you know?
Right.
So I get young cartoonists all the time saying, "Well, I don't have a good head for business. I can't figure that out."
They also say, Brad, that kind of cartoonist also says, "Well, surely the publisher knows better than I know. We've met some of these people. They are not the brightest bulbs in the room." You know what I mean? Like, and also the turnover is high. So whatever institutional knowledge that guy had, the new one doesn't inherit, or she left for a different company, and now you're stuck with this college hire. And by God, I know Jamar knows more about what he's doing than the person that's 22 that just came in on the marketing team for this or that. And so, an awareness of business, no matter what. I mean, even Jamar, coming from your angle, I'm sure that you navigate the waters that you are swimming in way better because of your awareness of business and your history in self-publishing and your ability to talk to strangers at a Comic-Con and say, "Hey, this is a really good comic. You should check this out."
Right.
That informs so many things about your comics career, even if you're with a publisher at the moment. You know what I mean? Right. And it will inform Brad and I, like in the past when we've been with Image or this or that. So the ability to take control of your career is empowering in a lot of respects. I'm sorry, Brad, I cut you off though. Go ahead.
It's something that I try to talk about all the time, especially when I talk to a young person at a comic convention. They say, I don't have a head for business. I don't know business. I can't do business. I grab them by the lapels if they've got lapels. And if not, I tell them to go get lapels, come back and we'll talk. I grab them by the fucking lapels and I say, "You are an artist. You are a writer. You can take a look at a blank sheet of paper and you can put something there that's compelling. That's a fucking superpower. You have an amazing brain. If you can do that, you can do your fucking taxes. You can do that. You can get a printer quote. Don't tell me you don't have a head for business." By this time, the lapels are really shaking. Don't tell me you don't have a head for business. If you've got a creative mind, you can do business. You just have to, here's the thing. You just have to decide that you want to do it. That's the problem. A lot of us can do it. We just don't have the want. And listen, I can't want it for you. If I can't say, I can't come, lapels I got, but I can't want something for you. That you got to do yourself, but you do have the brain for it. If you can take a blank sheet of paper and make it into something, Christ. That's all I got to say.
I'm standing right behind Brad as he grabs that cartoonist by the lapels, and I'm saying all of that, but with less cussing, Brad. That's what I'm doing in the background.
And give me your wallet while we're at it.
Yeah. But I mean, it's true though. It's that you in life you have to make your own magic. No one is waiting. No publisher, no editor, no audience is waiting for you with a little magical sword going, "Now, Steve, you're a cartoonist. Now, Jamar, you are a cartoonist."
Yes.
You've got to make your own magic. And part of that in the modern world is knowing how to own and control your own business and your own art, because knowing that will make it possible for you to keep doing it year 5, 6, 7 years from now. And unfortunately, a lot of the publishing world will have these featured articles with so-and-so is published with Marvel or this or that. But the problem is it's a self-selection bias because they were the ones that succeeded. And so, of course, Liefeld's going to say, "Well, you got to go with a publisher." And Liefeld's a bad example. But, you'll have some artists say, "Well, you got to go with a publisher. I'm just an artist. Let them do it." Right. Well, you've already self-selected the 10,000 artists down to that one that succeeded.
Yes.
Right. But what I'm saying now is that by owning and controlling your own business and by knowing how it works, knowing what gears to pull and what levers work when, we could get those 10,000 cartoonists, maybe, if not to a pro status, to a pro-am status. They're teaching during the day, but they're making cartoons for an extra $30,000 or $40,000 a year at night. Right. And how great, that's a wonderful thing. So by knowing how business works, it's super empowering for artists. And I'm sorry I got too passionate. I will let the conversation go back now. I'm sorry about that.
Well, the chat is enjoying Brad's Brad,
Yeah, listen, you come at me with lapels, you got a problem, mister. I'll tell you that right now.
We've learned wear a t-shirt around Brad, and by
That's
God,
right.
do not wear lapels, because
That's
that's gonna be your death knell.
That's right. Very, very passionate in
Yeah.
here.
Well, you know, in the old days, you would, because I tried self-publishing, and you had no idea of like how to reach your audience. One of the things I did was buy a list of comic book shops,
Mm-hmm.
and then I called on the phone all these various comic book shops to see if they would be willing to order my comic that I was going to self-publish.
Right.
That is a very inefficient use of my time.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Right. And it also highlighted in a way that most people don't know what the retail side is. You may be lucky to have a good retailer, but the retail landscape can be kind of a hellscape out there.
Mm-hmm.
Where some people are not going to, you know, and you guys, even when we use the term indie, you can't even really say that anymore, because what is indie? You know, it used to be like Fantagraphics or Zap or something was indie, but there's a lot of this old language that doesn't really apply to someone who's doing stuff today. And one of the other thing I'd be interested to hear you guys talk about is there's the internet market, then there's the reprint market of your internet stuff, and then one of the things I often hear people say is, well, you don't want to do something with your web comic, right, that's going to piss off the retailer. Right? Isn't that something we hear?
I mean, listen.
Retailers figure my thoughts exactly 0%.
Yeah,
0%.
Here's the thing: is that how do I frame this? A lot of the way that I try to ask myself how to handle a process or handle a new thing in my business is, if I was setting up this industry or this way of selling a thing or this way of marketing a thing, how would I do it now versus how they would have done it in 1960 or 70, right?
Right.
And to me, if you were starting the comics industry right now, you would not have dusty, out of the way comic book shops that are mostly visited by 45 and up readers, mostly male, and only selling this specific kind of a floppy book for the most part that is terribly unprofitable and gets damaged very easily. And so, and Brad, feel free to jump in if I'm going on the wrong track here. But what I'm getting at here is that I would never design the comic industry that way now. And so why would I ever try to sell any of my comics in that retail industry, which I think within 5 years is going to be, if not gone, incredibly diminished. I mean, I'm surprised, frankly, I am genuinely surprised that most survived the pandemic. And a lot of that might have just been the federal funding that was coming out to any business to stay open, because I genuinely thought that people would switch their buying habits to mainly online, wouldn't support comic book shops. And I will admit that there was more residual love for the comic book shops, and I love comic book shops as well, but more than I thought would have been enough to keep it alive. But I am hard pressed to say that I see a bright future for comic book shops. And so they factor not at all in my thing. I mean, am I too vociferous on that, Brad? Am I wrong?
You're 100% right. Actually, no, we're gilding the lily a little bit in that there is one retailer that you and I both pay attention to and deal with, even though we don't want to deal with. We deal with it despite all the red tape and so forth, and that's Amazon.com.
Yeah, I mean, just because it's the biggest marketplace in the English language. Yeah.
Once I put the book up on Amazon.com, I cross retail off my list and I go back to work. I don't do Diamond, I don't do any of those things. I've done them in the past. They do not deliver. And besides, if I'm going to do that, besides Amazon, I can reach those people that would go to a comic shop so much more easily and make a better profit without taking 65% off the cover price.
Well, that's what I was going to say is by not selling there, Brad, you immediately double your income. And so instead of making X amount, I'm making X times 2 on that book. And so why would I drive my online reader to go buy at a shop that's frankly usually unwelcoming and a little bit unkept.
Yeah.
And when I could sell to them online directly,
Yes.
and keep 90% of the cost, well, aside from cost of goods sold, I can keep all the profit. And why would I hand that off 55 to 65% of that immediately to Diamond? And cut my profit. So for me, it's not even a consideration, like genuinely not a consideration. And so when people are like, Dave, why don't you participate in Free Comic Book Day? I'm like, because I don't care. That's not my business. That is a dying industry. And it's designed to support the retailer by 2 or 3 bigger publishers that are also desperate to support that industry. That is not my industry. And I care on an emotional level. I don't care on a business level how it does with Free Comic Book Day, because it's not what I do. It's not where I go. It's not where I drive my audience, and it's not how I make my living.
I'm still intrigued by Free Comic Book Day just as outreach for webcomics, just as a way to reach a different audience of older people with that disposable income. That's the main appeal Free Comic Book Day still has for me, is just as an ad for my website.
I don't disagree with the mood of it, Steve, but I would disagree with the financials of it, because you have to produce a specific labeled Free Comic Book Day thing, and we all know what the cost per unit would be for that floppy. Then you would have to get it to Diamond to distribute around. Like, you'd be paying. I mean, it's essentially a form of advertising, and if you found that would be worth it, I can't argue with that. But to me, it feels like you're going the long way around to try to get a new reader. You know?
Yeah, it's preying on my nostalgia for comic shops.
Exactly, and also listen, that kind of thought, and I have this too. Don't get me wrong. It also plays on our insecurities, because we grew up wanting to be in newspapers, or wanting to be in comic books, or wanting to be in a physical comic book shop. And I get that. And so I understand it from an emotional Dave Kellett as an 8 or 10-year-old walking into a comic book shop. I get it. But like me now, I'm like, what are we doing? I would never design that business that way. Yeah. It's a weird business, and the distribution model's broken. The financials are broken. It's a weird consumer experience when they walk in the door. I'm like, I genuinely think about the comic book shop that you go to. 90% of the time, it's a kind of a weird place. And it's a comfortable shopping environment, and you're like, you wouldn't design it that way, is what I'm getting at. You know what I mean? Yeah. It's usually your local super fan who had an extra $40,000 and also got a bank loan and opened up this shop, but the none of the shelves match, and everything is out around the room, and there's dust on the weird Japanese toys that are sold on the top shelf, and like no one's swept in 7 years, and it doesn't feel welcoming to people. Anyway, go ahead.
No, I was just pointing to Jeff Manley's. What's the comic shop doing to sell my book? That's a great point. It worked. I was never one of those people that were brought out front at the comic shop. You know, I knew that. And by the way, I know precisely who I am, where I fit. I know who my audience is. I know what our relationship is, and I'm very comfortable with that. I'm never going to be a household name, although let's face it, I should be. But it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. I'm never going to be that guy. Dave and I both know who we are, where we fit, and it's okay. And by the way, we're both living out our fantasies that we had at 12 years old of being a full-time cartoonist and we come into the studio, do comics all day long, go home, and talk about what we drew that day. Although like today, I mean, there's the other side. Today I did not a whole lot of drawing. It was one of those business days, but that comes with the territory too. But it's a great life. It's a great life, and I wouldn't trade it for anything.
Yeah, agreed.
I want to kind of slow this down for a second, as I think the chat is starting to get mixed signals.
Yeah,
and this is something that I've been spinning around for the past couple of years, being in all these I have my toe in a lot of different pools these days. So you consider, and this is maybe hard. We're going to zoom out. Let's zoom out for a second. Everybody.
Sure.
Let's zoom out. Consider that we're talking about the craft and culture and lifestyle of being a cartoonist. There's several columns of what that is.
Right.
You know, I follow a bunch of people on Instagram who are professional caricaturists.
Yep.
Right. There's some who like to really make people look horrible, and some are very nice. And they're like, oh, look at that. Yeah. That's something. The comic book people are another one. The comic strip people are another one. Web comics are another one. There's a big carousel of different cartoonists and different ways that creators apply their trade. It's not necessary, I think, that everybody's going to want to have entrance into all of the different doors at the same time. You know what I mean? So for what you guys say, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but maybe some of your, your kind of reaction to comic book shops and the model and everything is from somebody who was watching this thing not work from the outside for a long time. And you have no interest of wanting to be in it. So I don't see that being shocking to me. It makes sense.
Yeah.
Like,
but let's also, Brad and I can soften our own language. You're talking to two guys who are huge evangelists for the possibility that didn't exist 40 years ago, that a cartoonist can own and control their own career. Yes. And that I don't have to draw the 900th version of Tony Stark being an alcoholic and trying to be the best Iron Man he can be. I can tell my own stories. Yes. I don't have to rehash another version of Batman for the 19th time. I can tell my own stories. I don't have to do a comic strip in a newspaper, like I said before, that tries to appeal to an 80-year-old and an 8-year-old. That has validity. That is a perfectly valid path. But what I'm saying is, for the first time, really, in 120 years of comics in North America, at least, I can do what I want to do in the most satisfying way to me possible, own it, control it, not give up any of my rights, and really make an audience happy. Is it a smaller audience than Lynn Johnson had? Absolutely. Is it a different way of doing business than Jim Lee did? Absolutely. But my God, is it satisfying? And and I will still own it 20 years, 20 years from now. So, for example, if I come up with Wolverine, I'm not going to be doing a GoFundMe 30 years from now when I need to get a liver operation. You know what I mean?
Or a teeth cleaning.
We need to have a realistic attitude about what comics have done to the last generations of cartoonists that said, like, this is fine. I don't need to think about business. I just want to be an artist. Cut to 30 years later. Please help out so-and-so whose kidney is failing, and Marvel never gave him $1. All right, well, we can see where this goes for the, and granted, there's been some incremental things that have improved on that front. Sure. But what I'm saying, what Brad and I, and we get really passionate about this because, God, we love cartooning, and this is the first technological generation that can take the reins themselves, keep all their rights. And that's why we even get mad at 20-year-olds who are going to webtoons, because we're like, did you read that contract? Did you have a lawyer review that contract before you signed it? Do you know what rights you just gave up to webtoons by saying I'm going to print on webtoons? By God, spend the $200 to have a lawyer look at that contract. And because you're repeating the same problem that people had in the 80s and 90s. So that's right. So anyway, we get passionate about, because we do love cartoonists. And yes, there are many paths to the same mountain. And yes, they're all valid. It is absolutely valid to do a comic strip newspaper. It is absolutely valid to be a New Yorker cartoonist, to be a comic book cartoonist, to be a graphic novelist. But we just get really passionate about this because honest to God, it's the better way to do it.
Yeah. Well, not only that, but I'll put a final button on this. Both Dave and I genuinely like comic shops. We like comic shop.
We do. Yeah, we do. I was there this week.
There's a couple that I go to here in Philadelphia. And we have nothing against comic shop owners, but we're pragmatists, and comic shops don't fit into our business plan. And so when it comes to that, it's just a straight write-off in terms of what we're willing to do. We might have overamped a little bit on that, but we love comic shop owners. If you're a comic shop owner, we love you.
What's funny is I didn't even check the chat, so I don't know if people are angry about it. But the thing is, like, Brad and my readership don't care if we were not supporting comic book shops or a Barnes and Noble or this or that, because we don't need to. We don't have to. And why would we be beholden to that if we don't have to? You know, that's not our industry to save.
And I love comic shops too, but their business model isn't ours. It's like they're doing X-Men and Batman. That keeps their lights on,
and they will forever do Batman. You know what I mean? Like they're going to do the 19th version of exactly. And listen, the proof is in the pudding. The fact is that audience is aging. That audience is diminishing. Those shops are closing. There's not more this year than there were last year. There's less of them, and every year there's less of them. So the proof is in the pudding in terms of what's working, and that is not working.
Yeah.
I've had a lot of discussions with my fellow cartoonists of my generation, and it's something that I really, what you said, I really came to notice a couple years ago, because there's this whole industry. I just mailed out one today of doing commissions, and you go and do the conventions, and basically it's like you're on a landmass or like a iceberg that's broken off, and every year it gets a little bit smaller, a little bit smaller. It's great to have that fan base, because maybe you can use, some of those people will follow you and transition to if you do something else. But one of the things I will say, this is a generational thing, and the people that are doing webcomics now will experience their generational divide in 5, 10, 15 years. There are some people who will there are some people who, if they can't put a backing board on it and a bag and collect it, they are not interested, because that is the part of the hobby that they've really invested in all of their life. Mm-hmm. Those kids that used to go to the conventions I did in the 90s, like my podiatrist, right? He was a reader of my comics. Those people, he's at the youngest end of that, right? Mm-hmm. But there's a lot of people, and we're going through this transition right now, including all the social media and everything, of there being so much entertainment, and now people are going like, do I need another reprint of this? Do I need another this? Do I need another that? All these different random factors complicate the system for you. So it's like, what you guys are doing is like harvesting people that are following you for you, right? In my case, there are some people that follow me for me, but there's also a percentage of people that follow me for Darkhawk or Batman.
Absolutely.
That don't give a shit about anything else I will ever do.
Yeah. Well, right? Mike brings up a really good point about comic conventions. And if you thought we pissed you off when we talked about comic shops, would you like to hear us talk about comic conventions?
Yeah, this is great.
And by the way, I want to ground this again, though, because all this comes from the fact that, like you three, Brad and I love cartooning. Yeah. And we love the idea, and we've seen it, that voices that 20 years ago could not have gotten a job, and I don't care who you want to frame them as, there are voices out there that could not have gotten a job in big-time publishing or even medium or small-time publishing 30 years ago that are now having a thriving career online. Yeah. And what I'm saying as a cartoonist, as someone who loves cartooning, I want to read that story. And that story is possible because they can own and control their career. So that's what this passion is coming from, is that more voices are coming in telling more stories that we didn't hear, and they're keeping their rights, and they're making a good living. Right. And that's what Brad and I are trying to evangelize for. And so, Brad, I with apologies, please tell us why comic shops are comic conventions.
Hold on. I just want to put Amani on top of this because he asked this question. And we're going to the same place. Do you guys still visit comic book conventions? How do you incorporate that into your overall plan?
What a great question.
That is a great question.
That's a perfect question. The answer is no. I stopped doing comic conventions in 2017, and it was the first year that my books, by the end of the year, the first year I made a sizable profit was the year that I stopped doing comic conventions, because what I stopped doing was I stopped going to one show and having a really good weekend and making money, and then going to the next show 3 weeks later and losing money, and going to the next show, and then they had that conversation. I think it'd be better if I'd have a better place on the floor. One time, honest to goodness, this is a true story. It might have been Wizard World Philadelphia. I was right across from Playboy Models. One of my best friends walked up and down the aisle 10 times, never saw me. His head was always the other way. So So the thing about that is that I was wasting money. I was a gambler. I'd go to Wizard World Philadelphia, they'd roll the bones, make a little money. Go to Wizard World, one of the Chicago shows, I forget which one. They paid my flight, they paid my hotel, they paid my table, and I still lost money. It was just not the show for me. And what happened was, so what finally I had to do is I had to sit myself down and I had to say, if you're going to stay in business, you have to do the full convention math. You have to add up what you're spending on the hotel, what you spend on the flight, what you spend on the food, what you spend on the table, et cetera, et cetera. And then subtract that from the money that you made. Because every time somebody tells you about convention money, they're always telling you the gross. They never tell you the net. They always go, oh, I made 12,000. I made 13,000. How much did you spend, dummy? Yeah, that's the real question. And nobody ever talks about that. So I had to have that talk with myself. You can imagine what that sounded like. And I said, you're not going to do a show unless you've got a clear pathway to profit. And those shows dropped like one after another. I don't even hire. I haven't done Wizard World Philadelphia. I can walk to that one. I haven't done that one in years because the money is just not there for me. Now, if it's there for you, if you're doing the full math and it's there for you, via con Dios, go with God. I'm the happiest man in the world for you. And there are people that are doing it and it's fantastic. But I can tell you right now, I'm not doing it. And Dave's cut it down to 1 and he's got a really special circumstance there.
Yeah. So I, at the top of my game of doing conventions, I think I did 11 or 12 or maybe 15 in my biggest year. I think it was 12 in my biggest year that I ever did. And now I'm down to 1. And I did about 30 different shows over the years across North America. And I absolutely love TCAF. I absolutely love SPX. I enjoyed New York Comic Con for what it was. So I'll say that. They're all lovely shows. But I even loved back when it was run by Jim DeMonakis. I loved Emerald City Comic Con. I don't love the current ownership so much. But anyway, all of that to say is, they all got winnowed down because, like Brad said, I did the hard math. And I was like, why am I doing this? And there's a lot of people that try to do the self-justification game of like, well, it's also promotion. Is it? Am I not also giving away my comics for free every day online? How is that not doing the heavy lifting for me versus me like going, hey, check me out. I'm at this one booth on row 29. You know, you can make the self-delusion that it's helping you. But unless you're making a profit at every one of those shows and enough of a profit such that it was worth it to be away from your family and or not just stay in your own studio and produce 4 pieces for eBay and watch an Avengers movie in an easier setting, then what are you doing? And so for me, the one show that I do still is San Diego Comic-Con because I grew up in San Diego, so I've got family down there and a place to stay. My travel costs are $40 in gas to get my 10-year-old Honda Odyssey down there. The booth cost me $3,500, very expensive, but I end up in the last 2 years either making 15 or 16,000, so it's worth it for me to do San Diego Comic-Con. The other ones, to hell no. I'm not flying out to New York for the privilege of being at New York just so I can lose money or only make $1,000 to waste 5 days of my life, you know, with sore feet and not work. The
one thing I wanted to point out too is that Comic Cons are not like trade shows because when a trade show, people are going to show their thing. They're not
It's like a lead, a sales lead. Exactly. Yes.
Yeah. They're not saying, "Oh, I got to sell enough Ford Chargers to pay for my booth."
Right.
At the auto show, that's not what they're saying, right?
Yeah.
And so I think the comics has all these other things built in that. Yeah, and if you're a young person, right? And I know my assistant now does a lot of shows. She's going to shows and she's figuring out which shows work for her. She's doing, you know, more manga, anime stuff. So she's dealing with a completely different audience than someone who's going to be buying, you know, issue 463 of Captain America. So there, even within all this, there's all these various orbits. It's not one orbit. There's a lot of different orbits, you know, like the person who's going to go to SBX is not interested in what I'm doing.
Right. That's a big issue, is because it's a thing of what I like what Dave said, and all of it adds up to. It kind of depends on the show. Like, what is it? How does it relate to you? How close is it? How are they taking care of you? If they're setting you, are they flying you in and putting you up, and then you bringing the overhead way down, and and the flavor of the show. I used to do Pittsburgh Comic-Con once or twice, and I'm like, oh, that's for tattoo art. And that's not
no, you're right.
That's not what I do.
That's not for me. Yeah.
So finding the right show that's right for you, ideally local and free or darn near.
Yep. But again, for Brad and I, it comes down to pragmatism, because, and I'm going to tell on myself here, in my 20s, what I wanted to do was be able to put on I'm a professional cartoonist hat, and I'm going to a Comic-Con, and look at me, I've got my booth and I've got my product on here. And would you like a flyer? Look at me, I'm a professional cartoonist. And I think if all of us dig deep enough, we all have that, like, I just want to be a pro, even now that we've been working for decades, I just want to be a pro. And in order to be a pro, I've got to do these performative things. I've got to go to a Comic-Con. Hey, maybe I've got to go do a gallery show, even though they're taking 50% of the cut. Like, why would you ever do a gallery show? Sell it on your own on eBay. But we do these things because it a little bit checks off a box that we had when we were a kid, that's what a professional cartoonist does. And so all of the Comic-Cons that I did and that Brad did are put by the wayside, because really it comes down to the two pragmatic decisions for both of us in our career. Is this allowing me to make the comics that I want and that bring me and my audience joy? That's pragmatic decision number one. Pragmatic decision number two is it making me a profit so that I can keep making the cartoons that allow me to bring joy to myself and to my audience? Those are the two primary choices. And so, without coming across as negative, that's why we don't do a lot of Comic-Cons. That's why we don't sell to comic book shops. That's why we don't do gallery shows, because I can do all of those things by just focusing on those two pragmatic decisions. Am I making the comics that bring me and my audience joy? And am I making a living doing it? And so for Emerald City Comic-Con, New York Comic-Con, SPX, TCAF, they all got put by the wayside, even though I love them, because they just don't make money, or they don't make enough money to justify 5 days away or 3 days away from the studio.
Yeah, absolutely.
I love it. And you know what is really interesting about this conversation, because there's a system shop going through the chat, and this is good. This is good. This is how we grow, right? Because now we're at the point where we understand there's so many cartoonists with different avenues and different lanes and all this kind of stuff, that you don't have to go to the thing because the marquee is flashing.
Right.
Comics.
Yes.
You don't have to go if it doesn't fit your needs. And I think that's a really important lesson that we've learned tonight.
Well, and listen, I'm sorry to people, because I didn't check the chat, but I want to say that to people that found Brad and I strident, it's because we know that this kind of independent-minded, owning and controlling your own business path, for all the cartoonists we know, can make for a really satisfying living. Yeah. Does it mean you got to wear more hats? Absolutely. But God, there's joy in it. And you won't be doing a GoFundMe 30 years from now when you need a liver operation, Right.
Yeah. And we hear all the time people saying, well, I'm going to the convention. I'm not making money, but I'm networking and I'm doing this kind of stuff and I'm promoting. You see how promotion works. You hand them that flyer and you watch them go down the aisle and
then 3 rows later,
throw it away. Yeah, absolutely. That flyer you worked so hard on. Yeah. You got the email list and they put down obscene things on the email list. Yeah, I've always said, and I've been saying this for years now, if it ain't clickable, it ain't promotion.
Yep.
There's handing somebody a flyer. I hear you. If you've got to be there, you better have a flyer. But man, if it's not clickable, it's not promotion.
Well, let me ask you guys this. Though.
Sure.
One of the things I think, and I've talked about this before, that the whole industry of cartooning runs on, is nostalgia. There's a certain amount of nostalgia that's like, I think, especially like with conventions, it's all about nostalgia, right?
I will grant you that for traditional systems, there's nostalgia, but nothing that Brad and I are doing are nostalgia.
So you don't feel that people who have been following you for 10 years are nostalgic about your work?
There's an emotional connection, but I wouldn't say that there's nostalgia in the same way that there's nostalgia for all the different variations of Batman. And oh gosh, I love them all because I love Batman. It's the one form of identity that I relate to or whatever. You know what I mean?
I think you're confusing nostalgia for community.
Mm.
We've built community with our fans, and that community is something that may go on for 10 years and so on and so forth. That's community. Nostalgia is when you have a yearning for maybe, quite frankly, somebody else's community, right? Nostalgia is me yearning for that that early age of Marvel Comics in the 1960s, where everything was hell's a popping and coming up. That's nostalgia. That's a yearning for someone else's community. What Dave and I are talking about is building our own community.
Right. So to put it in a different sphere for people, nostalgia literally is the desire for a thing that is either no longer there or is waning in existence, right? And so the people that miss dime store novels, it's because dime store novels don't exist anymore, you know? And so like Ray Bradbury building his career is not the same way that Scott, what am I going to say? Sanderson is building his career,
Right.
Because it's a totally different system, totally different model. And so if you have nostalgia for how Bradbury did it, it was because it was the only way that Bradbury could do it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so one of the reasons why we get passionate about it is because for a lot of cartoonists, and this is one of my favorite words, they're experiencing ontological shock, which is a worldview shock.
Happens to me all the
That
time.
like you're the fundamental ways of looking at your world. Like I grew up being like the way to be a cartoonist was to be in a newspaper. And by God, I wasn't a pro cartoonist until I got in a newspaper. And so I've got to get to a syndicate. And then I was like, why? Why do I have to get? It's because it's the way it's always been done. That way it's falling apart. Everyone I know is losing their job in syndication.
Mm-hmm.
Why the hell do I? Because it's an ontological shock. And that's what's required, I think, in cartooning for a lot of people to shake off this idea that I have to be in a comic book shop or I have to be in a gallery show or I have to be at a Comic-Con. No, you don't. You can have a wonderful career making comics online and talking directly to your audience, and they're supporting you directly.
Is it as cool?
being
in a gallery?
I would argue it's cooler. I really would. But I get it that in the sort of like baseball trading card world, people love their physical floppies.
Mm-hmm.
Most of those people are not actively my audience anyway. I wasn't going to get them in the same way that I don't get Pokemon fans, you know?
Yeah.
Steve, do you? I don't want to bogart this whole episode. You want to get to some of these questions? No, I am. Amani just asked a really good one. Maybe.
Oh, Amani's been asking great questions. I say bring Amani in again.
Yeah, no kidding.
He's the MVP tonight.
Yeah, Amani gets the gold star from all of us. It's great work.
Let's start with this one. Amani on Facebook. Is there a live, any in-person experience that you think benefits artists better now?
Yes.
In-person experience.
I'll tell you what I do. I haven't done it in a while because I had kids, but I would organize my own book launch parties.
Oh, I remember that. I was so
100%
jealous
profit.
of that.
And the way I would do it was I would go to a local alcohol producer that was launching a new alcohol. I'd be like, would you like a venue to promote your drink? Guess what? You can be the alcohol sponsor. And then I would go to a hotel or a bar and I would say, what's your quietest night of the week? Tuesdays? Would you like me to bring in 100 people into your bar on a Tuesday night and 10% of them will be buying food and drink? Great. All right, good. So I've got the free drinks. I got the free space. I'm going to sell books. And that's what I would do. And again, this goes back to like owning and controlling your own career. Like so many levels of management would have to approve that if I was at a publisher. I just made some calls, and hooked some people up, and the promoter was happy. They got to promote their drink. The venue was happy. I brought 150 people into their venue, and I was happy because I sold books at full price at the venue and didn't split the cost with anybody.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll give you one more to build off of that. I've said earlier, I stopped doing comic conventions, but I would still endorse going to any show or any convention, any trade show where you're the only comic in the room or one of a very few number of comics. In other words, Dave has a great series of books about pugs, right? And I've used to exhibit next to Dave, and these things fly off of his table. They sell very, very well. Now, if Dave went to a dog show and he set up his booth at a dog show selling just the Pugs book, he would make a mint partially because
Yeah,
it's
probably would
good.
do well.
It's a good connection with that audience, and partially because of the fact that he's the only book there. So all those people who are looking for souvenirs and so forth, and all those people that said, "Oh, I'll pick something up for you at the dog show," and now they're looking at a monogrammed leash, and they don't know what they're going to do. Now they come across Dave, and they've got this book, and that I would endorse. Going to any show where you're the only comic on the floor, I would give that serious thought.
Yep,
I would
I agree with
experiment
that. Yeah. But in general, though, I just want to say that to answer the question again in a different way, those are, I think, the exceptions to the rule. There's very few places where live in-person experience can match what we could do on, like I just had a Kickstarter wrap for my science fiction book, and it ended up at 128,000, right?
Mm-hmm.
What kind of in-person event could I do that could conceivably get me $128,000 compared to what Kickstarter's platform with me promoting online can get to? So why I guess what I'm saying is, again, it goes back to those two pragmatic decisions. I want to make the art that I want to make that makes me and my audience happy, and I want to make a living doing it. And so Amani, to your question, if I may do a book launch party when that book comes out, just because it would be fun and it would bring in a few thousand more. But for the most part, Brad and I think we would say that that's the exception to the rule, because it's just efficient. It's more efficient to do things online, to sell and fulfill and make the books online, than it is to do physical, older world in-person experiences. Am I wrong there, Brad? Am I overdoing it in terms of my?
No, you're 100% right. You're 100% right. And also, again, it comes back to that deal where you're going to comic conventions, you're going to in-person events. There's the travel time to it. There's the time you're doing it. There's the travel time back.
Yep. And then there's usually the post-COVID sort of like, I'm going to be sick for 2 days after the Comic-Con.
And I ended up losing a lot of studio time and falling behind on my own deadlines because this had taken up a lot of time. So there's a lot of stuff you've got to reckon with when you're making a decision like that.
I will say this though, Amani, to put a button on the whole thing, is that I do though recognize that much like a salesperson, companies still send their salespeople on a plane flight to go make a handshake and in-person meeting, because human beings still relate so much better to someone that they have met in person and shook their hands. Like Jamar and I know each other better. We get an intuitive sense of who one and I are, who each other are, because we've met in person. Any more than any email, right, Jamar, could have done, don't you think? Just having 20-minute conversations over a couple different meetings with each other. Like we have an innate sense of who the other one is. Yeah. And so I do grant you that in-person events as a cartoonist give you a lifetime of memory for the person that met you. And there is a value in that. I will 100% recognize that there is a value there.
You should write that down, a lifetime of memories.
What it does, it keeps paying forward. I'll get emails, as do all 3 or 4 of you. I'll get emails that say like, I met you in 2007 and you were so nice, and I'm going to support. I don't even know what this book is, and I'm going to support it because I liked you so much. And that has a real lasting effect over the years, for all of us that have done signings or gallery meetings or Comic-Cons. It pays forward.
I just got an email this morning from somebody who said that he remembered me from a comic convention. I think it was a comic convention in Austin, Texas. And he said, there's one thing I've always wanted to say after that meeting. I said, what was it? He says, I'm sending you the bill for my lapels. He says, they haven't been
the callback. 40 minutes later, the callback. That's a pro right there. That's a pro.
I love it.
That's a pro.
Steve, you want to hit a couple more?
Thanks for that question, Amani. And don't go. Oh, wait.
No, sorry. Paul Pate, great show. Love the passion you got.
Thank you, Paul.
All right, continue.
And we got another one from Amani. Brad, can you unpack your idea about social media being a distribution system, not a promotion system?
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
I love this.
The great questions. God. Fourth host is going to be my suggestion here.
Yes. Get this person a microphone.
I know.
So this is something we hit on the Comic Lab podcast an awful lot. And we talk about the fact that a lot of cartoonists are not so great at social media. A lot of them fumble on social media. They don't know how to use it well. And so as a way to help them, we came up with the 4 C's of social media, which is content, commercial, curation, and of course, the 4th C is kindness. Always remember to be kind on social media. And if you're doing a good mix of those things, and by the way, the kindness could also be comment. You should, commenting actively on your social media of choice. But what I tell people when it comes time to present their content, it's not promotion at that point. When you're putting your comic on social media, I should be able to read your comic on social media with as little interaction with the platform as possible. In other words, I don't want to click it. I certainly don't want you to post a link where I got to go someplace else to read it. As tempting as I know that is, I want to be able to read it. I want to be able to interact with it. I don't want, and for those of us putting a horizontal comic strip on a platform like Twitter or Blue Sky, where it's 4 panels across, and I've got to pinch it and zoom it to read it. None of that. If you're doing 4 panels, it's 2 on top, 2 on bottom, put it into a square and send it. I should be able to read all of that stuff with as little interaction as possible, because we know from copious amounts of experience that they're not going to. They're going to scroll right by it. Just next time you're on the bus or the subway or on an airplane or down at the park, watch somebody scrolling social media. They're making those content decisions in microseconds where they're deciding don't want, slow down, don't want. You've got to be able to catch them in that moment. So you've got to look at social media as a distribution system, not a promotional system. You've got to take a look at how is my comic able to be read. Sometimes you got to do the best you can do. I've got my Evil Ink comic is usually about 7 panels. There's not a whole lot of ways that I can slice that up on Twitter. I got to do the best I can. I do. And by the way, every one of you folks in the chat who's a cartoonist, I want you to listen to me and listen good. You probably need to make your type a little bit bigger. You probably need to increase the size because, again, people are reading on their phones on that little screen, and they're not going to click it. They're not going to pinch and zoom it. And your ability to stop them in that moment is predicated on your ability to get them to read the legibility of your comics. So you probably need to bump your text size up a little bit.
As Brad always says, they won't read your comic if they can't read your comic. So you got to, you definitely got to focus on that.
It's the first rule of lettering right there. So that's the Imani. That's really the long and short of that conversation. You've got to look at social media as a distribution platform. Too many of us look at it as promotion. And then that's where you see people, well, go read my comic on Instagram. Go read it on my website. Go here, go there. The only time I'm going to sign off on that philosophically is go sign up for my email distribution, because that's a lot more. What I do these days, my outreach on Twitter is, if you don't understand what's going on, because I do a continuity comic, if you don't understand what's going on in today's comic, it's because you've been missing updates. And I can't fix that. You can. You can sign up for my Substack, and you're going to get everyone delivered right to you, right? Yeah. I turn it around on the social media, and I say, if you don't understand, it's not my fault. It's yours. Here's how you can fix it. Click this link, right? That's the one link that I'll allow. But other than that, you've got to be looking at social media as a distribution system.
Well, and I was just going to elaborate on Brad on those 4 C's, because Imani, this might help in terms of our description of it, which is content is everything you create. It might be the comic you did of the day, the page, the single panel that you did for the day. It could be a joke of the day. It's just something you saw funny that happened to you. Hey, a bird picked up an entire hot dog. That is content, for lack of a better phrase, right?
Yes, it is.
The second one is curation. That's me saying, oh my God, you guys got to see this thing Jamar put up today, or Steve put up this amazing panel. You got to go look at that. Your curation is functioning as an editor, which makes you a point of value for that follower, right? So you're curating the wider web, the wider social media for that person, right? The third one is commercial. And in this one instance, this is where it is a little bit of a promotional system, because you're saying, hey, join us on Patreon, or hey, check out my Kickstarter, or hey, my new book is out, or hey, I have a book launch party coming to this hotel this and this date, right? So that's the promotional aspect, but it's only 1/4 of it. And then the fourth one being kindness, because honestly, social media is enough of a cesspool, and so we try to strongly advocate, like, listen, let's just be friends here. We can all be cool. There's no reason to be an asshat on social media, and so that's where that comes from.
Yeah. And if there's one that you're probably not doing enough of, it's curation. You're probably not curating.
Yeah,
because
we're probably all not doing that enough. Yeah.
Yeah. That's a pretty powerful one, because what you're saying is, here's somebody else's work that I think is worthy of sharing. And you think, oh, I should be promoting myself, but I'm telling you, that's a super powerful thing to do. And I guarantee you, that person that you curated, that person that you promoted, noticed it and is going to be there for you when you need a little boost sometime. It's a rising tide that lifts all the boats.
I agree. I mean, that is probably the thing I do every day when I wake up and I have my coffee.
Yep.
I am curating my social media. I'm sharing stuff I like. I do that every day. I actually do that all day.
Mm-hmm.
Sharing my stuff, but I share a lot of other people's stuff. I share a lot of stuff on stories. And that's where I end up having these interesting conversations.
Right.
Especially on Facebook, because I gave up Twitter. And Instagram is not formatted in a way where you can have a nice, long, interesting conversation, which I do all the time on Facebook. So for me, it's like, if another format comes along and it's as easy to use and curate and all that stuff as Facebook, great. They're still the best, even though there's a lot of problems. But I agree with you. I think sharing is really huge. And in the beginning of when I got on the internet, there was a place called the Drawing Room.
Mm-hmm.
Shane Glines and a whole bunch of animation people were on there. And that was a place that for a drawing board, there was a long time where a lot of people started interacting with each other that actually ended up leading to people getting work, networking with each other. So I really think that's a huge, huge thing. Going, here's my work, but here's stuff I like.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's beautiful. Amani, thank you so much for the question. We're now in the speed round because we're running out of time here.
Okay.
Alrighty.
Click.
Hold on, do we do the lightning round? Let me get
Is there a transition? Oh my God!
Well,
I love it.
Because last question was directly for Brad. This one's Dave. Have any board game toy fans bled over into your webcomics, or are they totally separate communities? And Amani's on fire.
By the way, I love reading this as though he started typing this and then like, oh God, there was a tragic accident at his place. And now he's like, oh shit, I'm on fire. Literally send help. Oh God, this is an incredibly painful situation. Will none of you help me?
I still have time to type.
Do we not care for one another here? Why am I being left to fend off this fire by myself? There is a convention in Indianapolis, I believe, Gen Con, and you guys can maybe speak more about it than I do, but they hold it in the single hottest week of Indianapolis this summer.
Yeah.
I think thanks to global warming, it's on average 180, 190 degrees in Indianapolis. No, but I do genuinely want to go because there is this interesting crossover between board game and webcomics folks. And it's one of the few shows where you see it, apparently. I have not been. But I will say this, I have had in my science fiction story, I've had a lot of people either wanting me to do a role-playing game from it or some sort of longer immersive board game. And I'm up for it. It's fun. It's one of those things that I sort of on my long-term checklist of things that I would like to try. But Brad, let me turn it over to you. Do you find that there's a board game webcomics interaction?
For me, not for my audience, not a whole lot. At least not that I see. Every now and again, somebody will say, "Oh, you should do this kind of crossover, that kind of crossover," and it's really not my wheelhouse. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of like you. It's on the list, but it's kind of far down.
Yeah, but to answer the question in broadest terms, I can absolutely see that being the case.
Yeah.
We are all, as cartoonist lovers, tending to be more introverted a tiny bit as our game players. You know what I mean? None of us, I'm going to just throw this out here. None of us were college ball players. I'm just going to throw that out. If I'm offending anybody.
Wait a minute. One of us was homecoming king.
Don't put me on this.
I'm saying
we all of us tended to be a little introverted in our elementary and high school years and dating years. And I think board games and role-playing games also tend to be, the Venn diagram is pretty strong.
Yeah. Yes, you're right.
That's what I'm trying to say.
See, I skew that because I played sports in high school, and I only played Dungeons and Dragons once.
Oh, is that right?
Well, there you go.
We'll bring you back, Mike. We got another question here for Dave. Amani, thank you for that hat trick. We have Dave, you still doing a comic camp?
Oh, okay. Yes. Let me give you because we're now in the lightning round. I'm going to give you a quick version of this.
Yeah.
Alaska Comic Camp, which happens in Juneau, which I would recommend to all three of you, by the way. I've already talked to Brad about this. It is a 5-day camping excursion in Juneau to an old log cabins and on a development about 20 miles outside of Juneau. It is one of the most joy-filled communities that I've ever been involved in. I've been, I think, 3 times now. Cartoonists from as far away as Japan, Mexico, Canada, the U.S. It tends to be about 60 cartoonists of all ages and all geographic locations, as I said. And what's great is they're all self-directed classes. So one cartoonist will be like, "Hey, I'm pretty well acknowledged as one of the best watercolorists in the world. I'm going to teach a class on watercoloring." Another cartoonist will be like, "Hey, I'm really good at lettering. I'm going to teach you guys a class on lettering." Another cartoonist will come in and be like, "Hey, I can help you set up your own S Corp or LLC. I've done it 3 times now. If you guys want any help on setting up a business," and they'll set up a class. And in the meantime, the food is great, and there's all sorts of ball games and hiking out in Juneau, Alaska. I love it. I will do it as many years as my wife allows me to go up there. It's so damn fun.
So that's a comic convention worth doing. It's not a convention. It's
camp.
Not public facing.
It's a camp. Although we do volunteer stuff for the local schools in Juneau, because Juneau is one of those isolated communities that anytime anybody comes into town, they're like, send them to the schools. The kids need, that doesn't matter what they do.
I always love that about SPX, how that last day, that Sunday, was always more about us talking to each other. And, I know the internet's replaced that, but
and it's like before, how I was saying how there's still value in shaking a hand and seeing and being in the presence of someone. This is one of the few places in comics where there's no sales going on. There's no like, "Oh, Jamar, I'd love to talk, but I got to get back to my table."
Right.
We're sitting in a cabin. There's fire. We're enjoying a scotch. One of us just did the dishes, so everything's cleaned up at the camp, and now we're going to spend the rest of the night talking about comics and that random Japanese comic that we fell in love with from 1972. And it's great. It's a really lovely. It fills the cup, in terms of needing it as an artist. You can't constantly be pulling from experience. Sometimes you have to add experience to your bank as a creator, and this is one of those places that adds to your experiences.
Beautiful. Brad, did you want to add to that? I wasn't sure.
No, I have not gone. I came very close to going this year, and I just couldn't justify the expense. But I'm hoping to. Dave's been working on me for the last 3 years. One of these times, I'm gonna.
I think I'm gonna give up on you and bring these 3 in. That's what I'm gonna do.
Yeah. And then
Beautiful. And our last question from YouTube, Michael DeFonte. How do you do networking with others if you don't go to conventions?
Oh, we're doing it right now.
Yeah.
There we go.
Yeah.
Lightning
Holy
round.
cats. There's so many different opportunities for networking, but I will, since my friend Jamar is here, and since I know a lot of you have the same thoughts on this, I do have to say the National Cartoonist Society has been a lot better in recent years at creating networking opportunities and so forth. I
some of which are local, by the way, Brad. We should say it's not just national.
I was going to say,
in your region.
I got at one of the Jamar is our chapter chairperson here in Philadelphia, and did a great event at the Pen and Pencil. I got a T-shirt and everything. So now when Cheapy McGee pulls out his wallet and the moth comes out, then that must have been a good time. But I will say the NCS has really impressed me in recent years. But also, again, let's go back to social media and the importance of curation. That's a really good opportunity to as you're doing that, to reach out and say, hey, I really like what you're doing. I like this about what you're doing. I like that about what you're doing. Start a little, a kind conversation. Start something that's kind of neutral and so forth, but that you can start a polite conversation. There's actually a whole lot of network opportunities flying right by you every day, and you're not paying attention to them, right? because sometimes it also takes a little bit of initiative on your part, wouldn't you say, Dave?
Yes, and so just because it's a lightning round, I'll say also there's localized drink and draws. Sometimes they're college-based, but sometimes it's adult-based. Drink and draws are great for just going out and being social in an environment that allows for people to have fun and let their hair down and draw silly little goofy things. In those kind of events. So,
and Maven, I just peeked over at the chat. Maven points out that they get a lot of answers from the Comic Lab Discord. And that's something
that's true.
I'm kind of proud of the Comic Lab community that is built up around our podcast. And there is a lot of conversations going on there every day that I'm very thrilled to tell you that I'm involved with.
And I will tell you, even in this chat, I'm sure that there are names and faces that you don't realize it, but over the course of months and years, you're going to be networking with them.
Yeah.
Like if I reach out to Steve on social media and say, "Hi, Steve, I love the way you drew that sword."
Yes.
A year might go by. He might be like, "Dave, I love the way you drew that duck, that one scene. Hey, great. Hey, you know what? Another year goes by. Steve, I love the way you drew that sequence. That was really well planned and executed." Yeah. That's networking. That's slowly building a friendship, and it might not come to fruition. And by the way, in the grand human experiment, it might never need to come to fruition in any terms of monetization or quid pro quo. It's just reaching out and talking to another human being that you're like, hot damn, Jamar, I can't wait for Worst Friends Forever, that kind of thing, And so that's networking, and it also is just friendship. So that's also a nice thing,
It's also being nice.
It's also just being nice. There's that.
I love it. Guys, we did it. We did
Holy
it. Guys. We just burned through 2 hours of amazing content. I hope you guys enjoyed that. And
we did.
That was fantastic. I loved it.
And so I hazard to ask, would you love to come back? I would love to.
I would come back in a minute.
I would come back if for no other reason than I'm sensing that whatever happened in the chat, people were not happy with what we had to say about comic book shops. So I'm excited to come back and redeem ourselves by saying I love comic book shops. Can't get enough.
LDS.
Yeah.
I'm going to Google ontological this evening.
That's fantastic.
That's a great word, ontological.
Yeah, you guys are great. And thank you for being a part of this and for giving up time in your studio chair. And there was a question, Dave, in the back. D Fish wanted to know about all that artwork on your wall back there.
Oh, sure. I can give a 2-second tour if we have what am I?
Sure.
What's in frame?
Go for
this is a Richard Thompson. That is a Luke McGarry.
Is that a original Richard? Is that the original of that?
That is not. He signed that one for me. Wait, I got to work my hand backwards. That is a Richard Thompson original.
Sure, one of his Par Almanacs or something.
That is Brad Anderson Marmaduke.
Wow.
That is a Wondermark. That is God. It's hard to do this. That is a Baby Blues. What is that? That's Kathy. That's a Sergio Aragonis. That's a Dan Ferraro. That photo over there is Jeannie Schultz giving me a little private tour of Sparky's desk there. That one up in the corner is Tumbleweeds that I think Brad gifted to me because I love Tumbleweeds as a kid. Although, let me tell you, that comic does not hold up on a second reading. Oh God, is it awkward as an adult to read that? But you know what? I love the line work of it. And then, I would love to give you a tour. My favorite one is the Bill Watterson original over there that for Stripped for the poster that he did.
The Stripped poster. Wow, yeah.
Yeah, and then the other one I have. Oh, and this one is great. I had an English professor who knew I loved cartooning. And I think, bless him, I think is reaching the end of his life. And he gifted me a Hogarth first printing from 1749 that I keep in my closet because I don't want light to ever hit it.
Right.
But it's beautiful and it's from 1749. It's gorgeous.
Wow.
And then I'm trying to think what other originals that are fun to see. There's a Jim Davis over there. Matt Groening over there.
I love pointing off camera to the art. How theoretically beautiful.
This is why you have to have friends when you do something like this, because they have to be able to chap your ass about this. Like,
that original
over there.
Michelangelo just off screen.
I've got an original Jack Kirby over here. I've got a Steve Ditko over
I
there.
can't turn this. Sorry. So Richard Thompson, Tony Cliff, signed Simpsons script by everybody. There's the Watterson watercolor. That's a John Byrne. That's a Zitz. Over the door is a Peanuts thing. And I can't give you that. Well, we can keep going around the studio here. There's Matt Groening right there. That is, I got to put my glasses on. Who is that? Oh, old man McGibbon's over here having to put his glasses. Oh, that's Burke Breathed. And then there's Pickles by Brian Crane. There's a signed poster stripped on the other side of that wall. There's Marcus Hamilton for a, what is that? A Dennis the Menace. That's Lynn Johnston, who, by the way, when we went up to her house to do an interview, Lynn Johnston was like, she lives out in the middle of nowhere in above Toronto. And it was the most sweet gesture ever. She's like, I can't send you boys back to Toronto without making you a sandwich. So she starts making us sandwiches, and it was so sweet. She was very nice. Lynn Johnson was very nice.
Now here's my question. That Brad Geiger framed original that I sent you, where's that hanging, if we were to point?
This is such an awkward moment. This is such an awkward moment for me. So there's a Pride of Place, Brad, is where it is. It's right at the entryway as you walk in.
Oh, is that where it is?
I mean, I can show you too. There is a Brad Geiger original. Hold on, if I can turn this around. I don't know what you're seeing now, but are you seeing that wall?
Yeah.
There's a Brad Geiger. Oh no, that's Mort Walker. Brad, sorry, I messed up. So sorry. I thought that was a Brad original.
A lot of people make that mistake.
But that's a common error. It's a Mort Walker from 1968. I'm so sorry, Brad. I thought that was a Brad Geiger original. That's on me. That's my bad. That's my bad.
That's on me. I love it. Guys, you guys were fantastic. We're gonna call it. Thank you guys for the most amazing crossover ever. Comic Lab X, pencil to pencil. That just happened. I love it. So for Brad, Dave, Mike, Steve, myself, this has been Pencil to Pencil. Just a quick update. Hold on, you guys. I got to do this. I just want to make sure I get the right month. We did so good by putting everything ahead. I just want to make sure I have the right thing. Okay, all right, hold on. I got a graphic. I don't have the graphic. All right. I don't have a graphic. But next week,
we'll fix it in post.
Yeah, I've been doing so well having another graphic. We're going to have Marguerite Sauvage as our guest, a fantastic comic illustrator. Really excited to have her on. And tomorrow, right back here on this Bat channel, Coffee Break with JN, if you want to watch me drink a cup of coffee and run my mouth. It's got its fans, you guys. It sounds weird, but you need to go check it out. Right here at 9 p.m. tomorrow. So I'm going to let everybody loose because I'm sure people have to pee. Thank you guys so much. Before we get out of here, guys, I don't know if you know this, but we do a little thing on our way out of here in the outro. Guys, I feel like the end game is afoot. and maybe a couple of short months. This might be the end of days. But I think I would be remiss if I did not ask all of our guests and ourselves to make sure you, come on guys, do this. Wash your Kirby hands. Let's see some Kirby hands. Put them up. What's your best Jack Kirby?
Am I doing late stage DC Kirby, or am I doing in his prime Kirby?
You're doing what you were doing before when you were showing us your Mort Walker.
Yeah, don't do that in the comic book shop, dude. We'll see you guys next week.
Hold on, let me go get my Brad Geiger original down here. Hold on, it's down in the basement. I got it featured in the. It's in the supplementary hunting and gaming room. That's where it is.
Yeah, that bit used to work better when your knees were a little bit more limber, wasn't it?
Good night, guys.